All right, guys, we want to just take some time to create a few videos for you as a small group leader to create just resources to help you lead your small group just during this season. Create some videos that you can come back to throughout your time as a leader to have kind of a central place for ideas, concepts, and tools in leading small groups, with co-leaders and coaches and things like that. So that's kind of what these series of videos will be. And yeah, hopefully they're helpful. My name is Gio. I'm the small group director here at the Capitol Hills campus.
I'm Garrett Palmer. I'm a small group leader. I've been a small group leader at Summit for this will be 15 years now here in 2025, and been a coach of other small group leaders for about 5 years now.
And I'm Mark Colbank. I'm one of the elders here at the Summit Capitol Hills campus, and I've been small group leader and a coach for 5 years.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so this video, we're talking about the importance of raising up a co-leader. And so oftentimes the challenges that we face in small groups is, basically people in our group, they feel like they are too busy or, don't have the best skill set to lead a group. And so what we want to walk through today is one, I think the importance of having a co-leader. Two, how to identify a potential co-leader, and then three, how to encourage those who don't think they can lead and inviting them into leading alongside you. And so, first thing that we want to kind of walk through is, why should we have a co-leader? So, Mark, please tell us why should every small group have a co-leader?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the primary reasons, just is to avoid burnout. God doesn't want you to do everything. He actually wants you to equip others to share the load, to serve. So, and this also allows a group to continue if something happens to you, job change, health, family crisis. So if you've got a co-leader in place, then the group can continue along to meet without any interruption. But another important reason is just simply discipleship. 2 Timothy 2:2 says to train up other reliable men and women to do the things that you're doing. So, the goal of discipleship really is to reproduce yourself. And really, that's the vision that we're going to be asking every small group leader to pray. Matthew 9:38, where Jesus said, the harvest is great, but the workers are few. So pray to the Lord who's in charge of the harvest and ask him to send more workers into his fields. So one of the things that we're going to be praying about over the next year or two is that every small group leader would train up 2 leaders, in the next 2 years, one to help you as a co-leader, and then eventually one to send, which we'll be talking more about.
Yeah, I think that's really cool, and I think really important if you can call those leaders up and just give them the why, the what, the how. I think is kind of a really cool place to send those out, but also raise up someone who can come alongside you. Garrett, this is something I want to ask you. How do you identify potential leaders? How do you go about evaluating potential leaders?
Yeah, I feel like that question's been answered a little bit differently every time we've done it. We're on our 8th small group plant now, and it's been different almost every time. But first of all, is consistency for me, consistency in presence and consistency in character. I'm not looking for necessarily a seminary graduate Bible teacher to lead a small group. I'm looking for somebody who's available and who is consistent in their care for other people. And so that brings me to my second point is, service mindedness. I find it better and healthier and easier even to look for leaders in servants, not to just try to make servants out of people who have natural leadership talent. Because not everybody that comes to you and wants to be a leader and has like this natural glowing ability is necessarily the right fit for a small group at that time, at least. And so people who are just consistent in their servant heartedness, I will start to then see if I can kind of key that into a more leadership role. The last time I did this, just for a brief story about it specifically, what we did was literally just, if you want a good, card up your sleeve, one night at small group, I said, hey, what if Heather and I, my wife and co-leader, died tomorrow, or we just moved away? One of those happened. What would you guys do? And just let it be awkward and quiet for a minute. And finally, one guy, Matthew, said, well, we'd keep meeting. And I said, okay, how are you going to do that? And he said, I don't know. We'll figure it out. Like some of us, me, somebody, like we'll read the scripture, we'll talk about it, we'll open our homes, like it'll be fine. And this guy is somebody who had never shown any natural proclivity for like leadership. He's one of the quietest people I know, just very reserved. And now he's leading a small group, because at that point I was like, okay, somebody who's willing to keep going, and it's not a cult of personality, it's not the Palmer small group. It's just a Christian small group. It's disciples gathering together in that person's mind. I can work with that. So I took him aside and we started just kind of letting him see what Spurgeon calls the pots and pans work in the background, because what most small group members see is probably 10% of what really goes on in a small group. And I know small group leaders are dealing with a lot of behind the scenes stuff. And so the decisions that are being made and what's being said kind of in the open forum is being informed in a lot of ways by what's going on behind the scenes. And I find that just really helpful to just let people see the kind of nitty gritty.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
I think that's awesome.
Yeah. And I would add to that, first and foremost, just like Jesus said, pray, pray that God would raise people up, and then look, and like you said, look for somebody who's faithful and committed. I always look for somebody that's a good contributor. Like the answers that they're giving are biblical, not heresy.
Yeah.
So looking for somebody that's got somewhat biblical perspective on things when they talk, and that they're not talking too much. That they're showing an awareness and sensitivity to others. It's not, like you said, it's not all about them. So those are some other things that are just good to look for.
Yeah, it's funny. Me being in college ministry, we had a similar kind of thing with looking for those who are willing to be discipled. We call them fat disciples. I don't know if you guys have ever heard this term, fat.
Yeah.
But
fat with a PH?
Fat with an F. And so it's FAT, faithful, available, teachable.
Okay.
So do you have someone who is faithful? Do you have someone that is available and someone that is teachable?
That's good.
And that's someone who you can identify, kind of as a leader. So, cool. Well, we get into a place where we find those who are willing to step up and to, desire to be a disciple in leading. How do we then develop that co-leader, Mark?
Yeah. How do you develop somebody? Always ask somebody once first, hey, would you be interested in leading a sermon discussion sometime? It's not a big deal. You just have to ask questions, prep a little bit ahead of time, so that you know what the Bible is saying and have some thoughts about it. And then you're really just facilitating a conversation and trying to keep things on track. So anybody really can do that. So ask them to do once. You never want to ask somebody to be co-leader, right off the bat. You want to see how they do, and then give them feedback. Mostly encouragement. Initially just say, hey, to compliment all the things they do well, give them a few pointers. And then if you feel like they've done a fairly decent job, ask them to do it again. And then as they do that, after they've done it a few times, say twice, ask them to pray about, hey, would you help me lead one of the meetings once a month? And let them do that over the course of a semester. And then after a semester, if they're really being faithful and they're growing and they're doing it, that's the point where you say, hey, would you pray about co-leading? Being a co-leader in this group, where you share the load, and I encourage sharing and hosting, so that's just as important as leading meetings, so that the primary hosts don't burn out. And then, ask them to pray about leading with you twice a month, so that they're sharing that load. And then over the course of, and at that point, start the process again. Like look around for another leader to identify and start them, taking those first steps. But by doing that initial one ask, it's setting a low entry point
Mhm.
for starting to lead. You're not initially asking them for this huge commitment, and then you're encouraging them along the way. So that's one of the ways you help people develop who initially may not feel like, I can't do this, but a lot of people can, just with encouragement and some feedback. So, this is, and then, asking them to step into being a co-leader of the group after they've done this for a couple of semesters, and eventually praying about sending people out.
Yeah.
But and coaches have a leadership development plan that they can kind of walk through with
Yeah.
you as a small group leader to help you think through how to do this. Garrett, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think expectations for timeline is helpful. So just understanding that usually I am planning on planting every 3 years or so. So I'm at least trying to pour into somebody for a couple of years, hopefully. Timelines can shift back and forth depending on the context, the needs of the church sometimes even. We've had people that were not being developed as a leader, intentionally, that a pastor said, we need small group leaders. And they're like, okay, I guess I should say yes because I can. And we just kind of hit them with the crash course. But that, casting vision, giving them the main things of why we do what we do, why we do it in small groups. What does it mean to be a small group leader, are kind of the things I try to focus on. I start with Acts 2 always and just try to go back to that so that I'm not just trying to replicate myself. I really have to stay away from getting hung up on just trying to copy a teaching style in another person, and just make sure that they know how to be available and love people.
Yeah. Well, again, I just want to kind of wrap this up here saying that, God does not call you to do all the work. He calls you to equip others to do the work. If you're doing everything, you're going to burn out. And you're actually robbing others of the opportunity to use their gifts to contribute. God wants you to make disciples, teaching one or two others to do what you're doing. So pray, invite potential leaders to take small steps to do the things that you're doing. Encourage them, help them develop their skills. Really, disciple making is teaching others to do what God has taught you about leading, and then giving them opportunities to do that themselves. And ultimately, you're reproducing yourself. So that's what we're praying for.